For years, you have probably heard that cancer comes down to genetics and bad luck, that it is a roll of the dice, that some people just get it no matter what they do and others never do. No matter how badly they live, it is one of the most persistent and anxiety inducing beliefs out there. And it is also at best incomplete.
Wait, are you telling me that the "it is mostly genetics" thing is not accurate? Because I have heard that from doctors, I have read it in articles. A friend of mine was diagnosed a few years ago, and everyone kept saying it is just bad luck. There is nothing you could have done.
And that belief is understandable. It actually came from a 2015 study that got a lot of media coverage. Researchers at Johns Hopkins looked at how often stem cells divide in different tissues and found a correlation with cancer rates. And the media ran with it. Most cancer is just bad luck. But here is the thing that study looked at the number of random mutations that happen during normal cell division. It did not consider environmental or lifestyle factors at all. It was a mathematical model, not a public health recommendation. And subsequent research has painted a very different picture.
So the bad luck idea was a misinterpretation?
Exactly. A landmark 2017 study from Stony Brook University reanalyzed the same data and found that while random mutations do play a role, the vast majority of cancer risk, somewhere between 70 and 90%, depending on the cancer type, is attributable to external factors. Things like smoking, diet, alcohol, environmental exposures, and yes, body weight. And this is actually empowering news because it means we have far more control than the bad luck narrative suggests.
Welcome to Longevity Lab. I am Robert.
And I am Claire. Today we are talking about something that affects virtually everyone listening. Cancer touches nearly every family, and there is so much conflicting information out there about what actually reduces risk that most people just tune it out entirely.
Or they do the opposite. I have friends who cut out sugar completely because they heard sugar feeds cancer. I have other friends who take supplements they read about online. I have friends who swear by juice cleanses.
Right. And most of those interventions have very little evidence behind them, or in the case of some supplements, they may actually be counterproductive. That is exactly why we are doing this episode, to cut through the noise and look at what the high-quality research actually shows. And I want to say this up front. We are not going to promise that you can prevent cancer by following a specific diet. That would be dishonest. What we can say is that the evidence shows certain lifestyle factors significantly influence your risk, and understanding those factors gives you real actionable agency over your health.
That sounds a lot better than worrying about things you cannot control.
Exactly. And it is worth naming that anxiety is a real issue here. Many people carry a low-level fear about cancer, and the wellness industry exploits that. There is an entire market built on selling fear and then selling the solution. Our goal today is to offer something different, clarity based on evidence.
Okay, so where do we start? What is the biggest factor?
Let us start with the most well-established, the one with the strongest evidence, smoking. And I know this feels like old news. Everyone knows smoking causes cancer, but I want to walk through the actual numbers because they are still staggering.
I think we all know it is bad, but I do not know that I have ever understood the actual scale.
So, according to the World Health Organization and the American Cancer Society, smoking is responsible for about 30% of all cancer deaths in the United States. That is about 1 in 3 cancer deaths. And it is not just lung cancer. Yes, smoking causes about 80 to 90% of lung cancer cases, but it also increases risk for cancers of the mouth, throat, esophagus, stomach, pancreas, kidney, bladder, cervix, and even acute myeloid leukemia.
It affects that many different organs?
The carcinogens in tobacco smoke enter the bloodstream and travel throughout the body. They damage DNA and cells everywhere. The mechanism is well understood. There are over 70 known carcinogens in tobacco smoke. They form DNA adducts, basically. They attach to your DNA and cause mutations. Your body has repair mechanisms, but chronic exposure overwhelms them.
And everyone knows this, and yet people still smoke.
Right. And the evidence on quitting is incredibly encouraging. According to a 2018 study published in JAMA, people who quit smoking before age 40 reduce their risk of dying from smoking-related disease by about 90%. Even people who quit after age 60 reduce risk significantly. The body has remarkable repair capacity, and within just a few years of quitting, the risk of many cancers drops substantially.
So it is never too late to benefit.
Correct. That is one of the most hopeful findings in all of cancer research. Now, the next factor is one that often surprises people because it is not as widely discussed.
Let me guess, obesity?
Yes, and I want to be very careful here with the language because weight is a sensitive topic. We are not talking about appearance, we are talking about the biological effects of excess adipose tissue, particularly visceral fat, the fat around the organs. This is a metabolic and inflammatory issue.
What is the connection? How does having extra body fat increase cancer risk?
There are several mechanisms. The first is hormone related. Fat tissue produces estrogen. Higher estrogen levels are associated with increased risk of breast cancer, endometrial cancer, and ovarian cancer. This is why postmenopausal women with higher body fat have a higher risk of hormone-sensitive cancers. The second mechanism is insulin. Excess body fat, especially around the abdomen, leads to insulin resistance. Your body produces more insulin to compensate. And insulin is a growth factor. It promotes cell division. When cells divide more frequently, the chance of random mutations accumulating increases.
So the insulin signaling is essentially telling cells to multiply.
Exactly. And the third mechanism is inflammation. Fat tissue, particularly visceral fat, produces inflammatory cytokines. Chronic inflammation creates an environment where DNA damage is more likely and where damaged cells are more likely to survive and proliferate. According to the International Agency for Research on Cancer, or IARC, excess body fat is linked to at least 13 types of cancer. Those include colorectal, breast, pancreatic, kidney, liver, ovarian and thyroid cancers, among others.
13 types. That is a lot, and I bet most people have no idea.
When I talk to friends or clients about this, the most common reaction is genuine surprise. A 2019 study in The Lancet estimated that about 4 to 8% of all cancers globally are attributable to excess body weight. That number is higher in Western countries, around 7 to 10%. And the trend is concerning because obesity rates are rising worldwide.
So what does the research say about weight loss and risk reduction?
This is where it gets interesting. The evidence on weight loss and cancer risk reduction is less straightforward because studying weight loss is difficult. Most studies are observational, and people who lose weight often make other health changes simultaneously, but the data we do have is encouraging. A 2022 study in JAMA Oncology followed over 100,000 postmenopausal women and found that those who lost at least 5% of their body weight had a significantly lower risk of endometrial cancer compared to those whose weight remained stable.
5%, that is achievable for someone my weight, that is about 8 or 9 pounds.
That is right. And the mechanism makes sense. When you reduce body fat, you reduce estrogen production, improve insulin sensitivity, and lower inflammation. All of those changes reduce cancer risk. Now, I want to move to the next factor because it is one that generates a lot of confusion.
Alcohol.
Yes. And this is a topic where the messaging in popular culture really does not match the evidence.
I mean, we hear that red wine is good for the heart, right? A glass a day keeps the doctor away.
That is a perfect example of how a nuanced finding got simplified into a public health message that does not hold up well. The heart health benefits of moderate alcohol consumption, particularly red wine, have been overstated. There was an influential theory called the French paradox, the idea that the French eat a high fat diet but have low rates of heart disease, supposedly because of red wine. But more rigorous research that controls for confounding factors has weakened that association significantly.
So the heart health claim is shaky.
At best. Meanwhile, the evidence linking alcohol to cancer is strong and consistent. According to IARC, alcohol is classified as a Group 1 carcinogen, the same category as tobacco and asbestos. That does not mean it is equally dangerous, but it means the evidence for carcinogenicity in humans is conclusive.
Group 1 carcinogen. That is a serious classification.
It is, and the mechanism is well understood. When your body metabolizes alcohol, it produces a cataldehyde, which is a toxic compound that damages DNA and prevents your cells from repairing that damage. Alcohol also generates reactive oxygen species, oxidative stress, which further damages cells, and it affects hormone levels. In women, alcohol consumption increases estrogen levels, which is linked to breast cancer risk.
So what does the research say about how much increases risk?
The relationship is dose dependent. The more you drink, the higher your risk. But importantly, there is no threshold below which risk drops to zero. A 2021 study published in The Lancet Oncology estimated that globally about 4% of new cancer cases in 2020 were attributable to alcohol consumption, with men accounting for about 3/4 of those cases. The cancers most strongly linked to alcohol are oral cavity, pharynx, larynx, esophagus, liver, colon, rectum, and breast.
4% of all new cancer cases. That is not trivial.
And it is important to understand the dose-response relationship. A 2023 systematic review in the BMJ found that compared to non-drinkers, people who consumed one alcoholic drink per day had a modestly increased risk of several cancers. For people who consumed 2 drinks per day, the risk increased further. And for heavy drinkers, 4 or more drinks per day, the risk was substantially higher.
So the idea of safe drinking is not quite accurate.
If your goal is cancer risk reduction, the safest level of alcohol consumption is 0. However, we live in the real world, and many people choose to drink for enjoyment or social reasons. That is a personal decision. What I think is important is that people understand the risk so they can make an informed choice. It is not about fear or judgment, it is about accurate information.
I appreciate that framing. I think most people just want to know what the actual trade-offs are.
Exactly. And speaking of trade-offs, let us talk about the next factor, which is another area where there is a lot of confusion.
Processed meat.
Right. In 2015, the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer classified processed meat as a Group 1 carcinogen. That caused a lot of headlines and a lot of anxiety. I remember people asking me if they had to give up bacon entirely.
I remember that. Everyone panicked.
And there was confusion because people compared it to smoking, but the classification system is about the strength of the evidence, not the level of risk. Smoking and processed meat are both Group 1 carcinogens, but the magnitude of risk is vastly different. With smoking, the risk of lung cancer increases about 20-fold. With processed meat, the increased risk of colorectal cancer is estimated to be about 18% per 50 grams consumed daily.
50 grams. That is about 2 slices of bacon or 1 hot dog.
Correct. and the mechanism is understood. Processed meats contain nitrates and nitrites that are added as preservatives. During cooking and digestion, these can form N-nitroso compounds, which are DNA-damaging agents. High-temperature cooking methods like grilling or pan frying also produce heterocyclic amines and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, both of which are carcinogenic.
So, what is the practical takeaway? Do we need to cut processed meat out completely?
The research does not suggest that occasional consumption is a major risk factor. The risk increase is associated with regular daily consumption. A 2021 study in Nature Communications found that reducing processed meat intake to about 10 grams per day could potentially prevent a significant number of colorectal cancer cases at the population level. But at the individual level, having a bacon sandwich once a week is not going to dramatically change your risk.
So, it is about frequency and quantity, not elimination.
Exactly. And the same principle applies to red meat. Unprocessed red meat is classified as a Group 2A carcinogen, probably carcinogenic to humans. The evidence is suggestive but less conclusive than for processed meat. The recommendation from the World Cancer Research Fund is to consume no more than 3 portions of red meat per week and to avoid processed meat as much as possible.
I think that is a very different message from what many people have heard.
At this point, I want to step back and talk about something that ties all of these factors together. And it is something that the research consistently identifies as one of the most important protective factors.
Physical activity.
You read my mind. The evidence for physical activity in reducing cancer risk is remarkably strong. A 2016 study in JAMA Internal Medicine pooled data from 1.44 million people and found that higher levels of physical activity were associated with lower risk of 13 different types of cancer. The risk reductions ranged from 10% for breast cancer to 42% for esophageal cancer.
42% for esophageal cancer. That is substantial.
It is. And the mechanisms are multiple. Physical activity helps maintain a healthy body weight, which we talked about. It improves insulin sensitivity, lowers inflammation, reduces oxidative stress, and improves immune function. Regular exercise also reduces circulating levels of estrogen and other hormones that can promote cancer growth.
What about the type and amount of activity?
The research shows that both moderate and vigorous activity are beneficial. The American Cancer Society recommends at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity per week, or 75 minutes of vigorous activity, or a combination. And it does not have to be done all at once. Breaking it into shorter sessions is fine.
So a brisk 30-minute walk 5 days a week meets that recommendation.
Exactly. And the benefits appear to be dose-dependent. More activity is associated with greater risk reduction up to a point, but even modest increases in activity from a sedentary baseline produce meaningful benefits.
That is encouraging. It does not have to be intimidating.
Now, I want to address something that I know is on many people's minds. What about diet beyond just processed meat? What does the evidence say about specific foods that prevent cancer?
I have heard so many claims. Broccoli fights cancer. Berries are antioxidant powerhouses. Turmeric is anti-cancer.
And many of those claims are based on laboratory studies where isolated compounds were applied to cancer cells in a dish or given to animals in very high doses. That is very different from eating those foods as part of a normal diet.
So the evidence does not support those claims?
The evidence supports the idea that a predominantly plant-based dietary pattern is associated with lower cancer risk. The World Cancer Research Fund's Continuous Update Project, which systematically reviews the global evidence, consistently finds that diets rich in whole grains, vegetables, fruits, and legumes are associated with lower risk of several cancers. But the evidence for individual superfoods is weak.
So it is the pattern not the individual ingredient.
Correct. Whole grains are associated with lower risk of colorectal cancer. Foods containing dietary fiber are associated with lower risk of colorectal cancer. Non-starchy vegetables and fruits are associated with lower risk of several cancers. But the mechanism is not about a single miracle compound, it is about the cumulative effect of thousands of phytochemicals, fiber, and nutrients working together.
That is a much more realistic message. Eat well overall, not chase magic bullets.
And this is an area where I want to highlight something that may surprise listeners. A 2020 study in Nature Metabolism found that the relationship between diet and cancer risk goes beyond the direct effects of nutrients. The gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria living in your digestive tract, plays a significant role.
The gut microbiome again. It seems to influence everything.
It really does. The bacteria in your gut metabolize compounds from the food you eat. Some of those metabolites are protective, like short-chain fatty acids produced when bacteria ferment fiber. These compounds reduce inflammation and strengthen the intestinal barrier. Other metabolites can be harmful. When the microbiome is disrupted, a state called dysbiosis, it can contribute to chronic inflammation and DNA damage.
So, what does the research say about maintaining a healthy microbiome for cancer prevention?
The most evidence-based approach is to consume adequate dietary fiber, about 25 to 30 grams per day, from a variety of plant sources. Fiber feeds beneficial bacteria. A diverse diet with plenty of different plant foods supports a diverse microbiome, which is associated with better health outcomes. Fermented foods like yogurt, kefir, and sauerkraut may also help by introducing beneficial bacteria, though the evidence is less conclusive.
I want to come back to something you mentioned earlier that I found really interesting. The idea that some supplements might actually be counterproductive.
This is a topic I feel strongly about, because there is a multi-billion-dollar supplement industry that sells the idea that you can supplement your way out of a poor diet. The evidence simply does not support that.
Can you give an example?
Beta-carotene. In observational studies, people who eat more fruits and vegetables rich in beta-carotene had lower rates of lung cancer. That led to a hypothesis that beta-carotene supplements might prevent lung cancer. Several large randomized controlled trials tested this hypothesis. The most famous was the ATBC trial in Finland, which gave beta-carotene supplements to male smokers. The result was surprising. Those who took beta-carotene had an 18% higher risk of lung cancer compared to those who took placebo.
The supplement increased risk?
That is right. And other trials with vitamin E and selenium have similarly failed to show protective effects, with some showing potential harm. A 2022 review in the New England Journal of Medicine concluded that for the general population, there is no evidence that any dietary supplement reduces cancer risk.
That is quite a statement.
The consistent finding across high-quality research is that nutrients obtained from whole foods, in their natural context, are associated with health benefits. But isolated compounds at high doses can behave very differently in the body. This is why I always emphasize dietary patterns over supplements.
So, what is the dietary pattern with the best evidence?
The Mediterranean diet has the strongest evidence base for overall health and longevity, including reduced cancer risk. The PRIDIME trial in Spain, a large randomized trial published in 2018, found that a Mediterranean diet supplemented with extra virgin olive oil was associated with a lower risk of breast cancer specifically. Prospective cohort studies consistently find that higher adherence to a Mediterranean dietary pattern is associated with lower overall cancer mortality.
And what defines a Mediterranean diet in practical terms?
The key components are high consumption of vegetables, fruits, legumes, whole grains, and nuts. Olive oil is the primary fat source. Fish and seafood are consumed regularly. Poultry and eggs in moderation. Red meat and sweets are consumed infrequently. and meals are eaten with family or friends, which is a component often overlooked.
It sounds sustainable, not extreme.
That is exactly the point. The most evidence based approach is not about perfection or deprivation, it is about consistent, moderate patterns over time. A 2023 study in Nature Medicine modeled the impact of dietary changes on cancer incidence and estimated that improving dietary quality could prevent about 5% of cancer cases in high income countries.
5% does not sound huge, but when you think about the absolute numbers, that is millions of cases globally.
Exactly. And when you combine multiple healthy lifestyle factors, the impact is much larger. A 2018 study in cancer epidemiology, biomarkers and prevention found that adherence to 7 healthy lifestyle recommendations, including maintaining a healthy weight, being physically active, eating a healthy diet, limiting alcohol, and not smoking, was associated with a 40 to 60% lower risk of cancer.
That is substantial.
It is. And I want to be very precise here. A 40 to 60% lower risk does not mean a 40 to 60% guarantee. It means that compared to people who follow none of those recommendations, people who follow most of them have roughly half the cancer risk. That is a population level statistic. It does not mean any individual can eliminate their risk, but it does mean that lifestyle choices have a very real impact.
I want to talk about something that I think about a lot. There's so much information out there, and a lot of it is contradictory. How does a regular person figure out what to trust?
That is an excellent question, and it is central to why we started this podcast. Here is my framework. First, look for consistency across multiple high quality studies, not just one headline grabbing finding. Second, pay attention to the type of study. Randomized controlled trials are the gold standard, but for many lifestyle questions, large prospective cohort studies with long follow up periods are the best evidence we have. Third, check the source. Studies published in reputable peer reviewed journals are more reliable than press releases or social media posts. Fourth, be skeptical of any claim that promises a dramatic result with minimal effort.
The one weird trick approach.
Exactly. And fifth, be particularly skeptical of health claims that come from someone selling a product. If the only way to get the benefit is to buy a supplement, a course, or a program, there is a conflict of interest.
I think that framework is really helpful. Let me ask about one specific thing I have heard a lot about, the idea that stress causes cancer.
This is another area where popular belief and scientific evidence diverge. There is no strong evidence that psychological stress alone causes cancer. The research on this question has been conducted for decades, and the results are mixed. Some studies find a modest association, but it is difficult to separate stress from other lifestyle factors. People under chronic stress may smoke more, drink more, sleep poorly, and eat worse, and those are the factors that influence cancer risk.
So stress might contribute indirectly.
Indirectly through its effects on behavior and physiology. Chronic stress elevates cortisol, which can affect immune function. A 2021 study in Nature Reviews Cancer found that chronic stress can alter the tumor microenvironment in ways that might promote cancer progression in people who already have cancer. But the evidence that stress initiates cancer in healthy individuals is weak.
That is a distinction I had not thought about. Stress might affect progression, but not initiation.
That is exactly right, and it is a good reminder that scientific literacy is about understanding nuance, not just memorizing headlines.
Okay, let us talk about the next factor. What about sleep?
Sleep is an area of growing interest in cancer research. The evidence linking poor sleep to increased cancer risk is accumulating. A 2019 meta-analysis in cancer research found that people with long-term sleep disturbances had a 15 to 30% higher risk of several cancers, including breast and colorectal cancer.
What is the mechanism?
Melatonin is a key factor. Melatonin is a hormone produced by the pineal gland in response to darkness. It regulates sleep wake cycles and has antioxidant and anti inflammatory properties. When you expose yourself to light at night from screens, for example, melatonin production is suppressed. Some laboratory studies suggest melatonin may inhibit cancer cell growth. There is also evidence that disrupted circadian rhythms affect immune function and DNA repair processes.
So the recommendation would be to prioritize good sleep hygiene.
Specifically, aiming for 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep per night, maintaining a consistent sleep schedule even on weekends, reducing exposure to bright light in the evening, and keeping the bedroom dark and cool. The World Health Organization has classified shift work that involves circadian disruption as probably carcinogenic. Group 2A.
That is a big deal. A lot of people work night shifts.
It is, and the evidence is strong enough that some European countries have implemented screening programs for shift workers. The practical takeaway for those who do not work shifts is to respect your natural circadian rhythm as much as possible.
Okay, I want to broaden the lens a bit. We have talked about individual lifestyle factors, but I know from listening to this podcast that the research community is now looking at the bigger picture, the exposome concept.
The exposome is a concept I love because it captures the complexity of what we are actually exposed to. It includes diet, physical activity, sleep, stress, but also environmental exposures like air pollution, water quality, and chemical exposures. A 2022 study in Nature Communications looked at the combined effect of multiple environmental exposures on cancer risk and found that the exposome explains a significant portion of cancer cases.
What about environmental factors that people cannot easily control, like air pollution?
Air pollution is classified as a Group 1 carcinogen by IARSA, with the strongest evidence linking fine particulate matter to lung cancer. A 2020 study in the Lancet Planetary Health estimated that air pollution contributes to about 1.8% of lung cancer cases globally. That number is higher in areas with poor air quality. This is a factor where individual control is limited, but policy changes matter. And there are individual steps like using air purifiers, avoiding outdoor exercise during high pollution days, and wearing masks in heavily polluted areas.
So some factors are individual and some require collective action.
That is a really important insight, and I think it helps with the psychological burden. Many people feel guilty or anxious about not being perfect with their health habits, but the evidence shows that perfection is not required. What matters is the cumulative effect of consistently good habits over time.
I want to get your take on something that has been getting a lot of attention recently. Metformin and cancer risk.
Metformin is a diabetes medication that has been studied extensively for its potential anti-cancer effects. Observational studies have found that people taking metformin have lower rates of several cancers. However, more recent randomized trials have not confirmed a clear benefit in non-diabetic populations. A 2021 trial in the Journal of Clinical Oncology found no significant reduction in cancer incidence among people taking metformin versus placebo.
So the excitement might have been premature.
That is a common pattern in health research. Early observational studies generate hypotheses, and then more rigorous randomized trials test those hypotheses. Often the initial findings do not hold up. This is why I emphasize that well-conducted randomized trials are the gold standard.
And what about aspirin? I have heard that taking a low dose daily might reduce cancer risk.
The evidence for aspirin is actually stronger than for metformin. Multiple large randomized trials have found that daily aspirin reduces the risk of colorectal cancer by about 30 to 40%, particularly after 5 to 10 years of use. A 2023 analysis in The Lancet estimated that regular aspirin use could prevent a significant number of colorectal cancer cases. However, aspirin carries risks, including gastrointestinal bleeding and hemorrhagic stroke. The decision to take aspirin for cancer prevention should be made in consultation with a doctor, weighing the benefits against the risks.
So that is not a take this yourself recommendation.
Correct. This is a perfect example of why medical decisions should be individualized. For someone with a family history of colorectal cancer, the benefits may outweigh the risks. For someone with a history of stomach ulcers or bleeding disorders, the opposite is true.
I think that ties into a bigger point. The best approach is personalized, evidence-based, and respectful of individual circumstances.
That is our philosophy on Longevity Lab. We are not here to tell you what to do. We are here to share what the research says so you can make informed decisions with your healthcare provider.
Let me ask about something that I know concerns our audience. What about screening? When should people start?
Screening recommendations vary by cancer type and by country. For colorectal cancer, the American Cancer Society recommends starting regular screening at age 45 for average risk individuals. For breast cancer, mammograms are generally recommended starting at age 40 to 45. For cervical cancer, screening starts at age 21 and can be done with pap smears or HPV testing. For lung cancer, annual screening with low-dose CT is recommended for high-risk individuals, specifically those aged 50 to 80 with a significant smoking history.
And screening can detect cancer early when it is most treatable.
That is the key principle. The goal of screening is to detect cancer at an early stage when treatment is most effective. And screening does not prevent cancer, but it does reduce cancer mortality. A 2021 study in JAMA estimated that regular colorectal cancer screening reduces the risk of dying from colorectal cancer by about 60 to 70%.
That is a huge reduction.
It is. And there are also preventive screenings, like colonoscopy, where polyps can be removed before they become cancerous. That is true cancer prevention.
I feel like we have covered an enormous amount of ground. Can you summarize the key takeaways for someone who wants to take action?
Absolutely. And I want to frame this in terms of what the evidence says has the biggest impact. Number one, if you smoke, quitting is the single most impactful thing you can do for cancer prevention. The benefits start immediately and increase over time.
That one is non-negotiable.
Number two, maintain a healthy body weight. The evidence linking excess body fat to multiple cancers is strong and consistent. Even modest weight loss of 5 to 10% can reduce risk.
5 to 10% is achievable.
Number three, be physically active. Aim for at least 150 minutes of moderate activity per week. This is associated with lower risk of at least 13 cancers.
A 30-minute walk most days.
Number four, limit alcohol. For cancer risk reduction, less is better. If you drink, keep consumption to no more than 1 drink per day for women and 2 for men, recognizing that any amount carries some risk.
And I think it is worth repeating that 0 is the only level with no increased risk.
Correct. Number five, eat a predominantly plant-based diet with plenty of fiber, fruits, vegetables, and whole grains, and limit processed meat and red meat. The Mediterranean diet has the best evidence.
Pattern over perfection.
And number six, prioritize sleep and manage stress. While the evidence is less definitive than for the other factors, both appear to play a role.
Claire, I think the most important message I am taking away is that this is about incremental changes, not dramatic transformations.
That is exactly right. A 2024 study in Cancer Medicine modeled the impact of adopting 5 healthy lifestyle habits and estimated that doing so could prevent about 30 to 40% of cancer cases. But here is what is crucial. You do not need to do all of them perfectly. Each additional healthy habit adds protection. Every small change matters.